All right. Hello, everyone. The Black Woman Book Expo author that I will be introducing to you is Holly Jenkins. She wrote the book called Daddy Don't, Letter to My Father in Childhood Sexual Abuse 101, Not an Elective. She released these books on, when did you release these, Ms.
These
Holly?
are several years ago, over 10 years ago.
Okay,
But they're
cool.
still popular and they're still selling now.
Okay, wonderful. So welcome, Miss Holly. Can you briefly tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became an author?
There's not much to tell as far as how I became an author. It was mostly, I was in a lot of trauma and distress for years after the abuse that I had suffered, from my father starting at age 5. And I was looking for a way to reconcile with some of, the issues that I was dealing with. So I came up with the idea of just writing him some letters, even though he had, deceased. I wanted to just write and get my own emotions out. So that's what I did. And, I started off from the viewpoint of a 5-year-old. The letter would start off like, dear daddy, and, go from there. And so I progressed through my, teenage years into my adulthood, just writing him letters about where I was. And all this was in retrospect, of course, when I got to the point that I could do something like that. And I had shared the letters with an executive at Women Helping Women at the time. And she's the one who suggested that I publish the letters, which had not been on my radar at all. Mm-hmm. So with her encouragement and support, I had, it was funny because I had sent the manuscript to several publishers and agents, and I've got like no rejections all over the place. And I'm like, oh my God. And it was just, it was just so traumatic again for me, because I felt that was, invalidation, if nothing else, that, my story wasn't even worth someone reading about. That's how I took it. But then at the end, I started realizing this is my story and it is true. And if I need validation, I need to publish these myself. So I went about learning the self-publishing, route, all the ins and outs. So I published the book myself, and from there, it had won several awards and, was received all over the country. I was asked to speak all over, the United States and abroad. And I also appeared on some national television shows, and I just did a lot of things with the book. So I realized then that absolutely, I always knew that I wasn't the only one, but at the same time, I knew other people needed to hear my story as well. So that's kind of how that all evolved.
Right. So I see that you told me a lot about the book already. So is there anything else you would like to say about the book and what your different target audiences are and the themes for the book?
Well, the target audience is just about anyone. I would say children read my book also, but I ask that there's a parent or guardian, that reads it along with them, so that there's questions that the adult can answer, and, reassure the child of what's really going on and things like that. Well, there's a lot of schools who purchase my books in bulk for that purpose, to help with, the trauma that children are experiencing. And you can get my books, like the other one, Childhood Abuse Sexual 101, is the subtitle is not an elective, because I don't feel that we should be, picking and choosing whether we learn about child abuse, because if 1 out of every 3 to 4 girls in this country are sexually assaulted before they reach the age of 18, I think that number is a little bit too big for us to get in a place that we don't feel that it can affect our lives. So that's why I put that it's not an elective. And they are available on my website, which is restartyourlifenow.org, not .com, but .org. And, they can be purchased there.
Okay, wonderful. So I think you might have touched on this briefly, but what inspired you to write this book?
The second one?
Both of them. Mm-hmm.
Okay, what inspired me?
Yeah, what inspired you?
Okay, I'm sorry, I can barely hear you. just wanting to get some information out there, debunk some myths that this doesn't happen in the African American community. I would hear that a lot. I've had people walk up to me and say, this doesn't happen in our community like you're saying that it does, and I know that that's not to be true. I did 5 years of research at the Ohio Reformatory for Women up in Marysville, where 85% of the women who are incarcerated in this country have been victims of sexual assault and sexual abuse as children. 85% is a pretty large denominator to discount, and a large number of our women in prison are African American women. So it's not just happening in other cultures, it is deeply embedded in our culture also. And one of the things with our culture, we have a thing about not telling what's going on in our house. And that's why people don't talk about it. And so some people are lulled into believing that it doesn't happen just because children aren't talking about it. And that's just not true.
Right.
So that's what inspired me, is just to get the knowledge out there.
Okay. Is there any one thing you want people to take away from this book?
That they can, well, two things really, that if mainly to get the information to them and to understand the ins and outs and dynamics of child abuse, the trauma that's left behind, how it is generational trauma. And the other thing is that if there's something burning inside of you to do, and no one's on your bandwagon, you can do it yourself. And since I've published my own book, I have been, I'll say, lucky enough for people to share their stories with me so that I can help them publish their books, going through the self-publishing process. There's a lot of local authors that I've worked with that, have books out that I've either edited or published or helped them publish. So that's the main thing that I want people to understand, is that your story is your story and you have a right to tell it, and you have an obligation to tell it, in fact. So that's the main thing that I want people to know about my books.
Okay. So I know you stated your website, but where can people purchase your books at? Is it just on your website, or is it on Amazon or anywhere else?
My books at this point are only through my website. Years ago, I did the bookstores and the malls. I had them everywhere. And of late, I've just confined selling them online.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you, Miss Holly, for allowing me to interview you today. It was a pleasure. And everyone, please be sure to support Miss Holly by purchasing her books called Daddy Don't, Letter to My Father in Childhood Sexual Abuse 101, Not an Elective. Thank you.
Thank you.